So this idea, worth action, I want you to imagine the roughly 10,000 cultures that anthropologists discuss as having occurred in largely the last 30,000 years, and assume that there are pros and cons to every culture. I see it as I travel around the world: more empathy and responsiveness in this culture, more technological innovation in this culture. But I also see the trade-off. And what I'm interested in is a total map of human well-being and human excellence, so that we, rather than looking through a lens of superiority, for example, in the Western cultures that are more technically advanced, that we rather look at the trade-offs. Now, here's what I mean, and I think it's valuable to take this down to a personal level. Number one, the feminine-masculine balance within an individual. Knowing that an individual that actively invites and honors all of who they are is going to have a higher level of well-being. There are stress indicators within the body. Again, higher cortisol levels in different environments. Talking about the physical toll on the body that a given cultural environment produces for a similar type of situation, an earthquake, etc. The cortisol readings. We have things like left brain intelligence in this, that, and the other area, which we're very good at elevating and kind of marking as high. But the sense of wonder, the sense of innocence. In other words, if we take the emotional dimension, the full spectrum of emotion, and look at the vitality, the responsiveness, the resilience, the range without shame, shame being a big stressor and source of trauma, the range of emotion tolerated without shame, the natural energy levels. So we have the emotional spectrum, we have the mental spectrum, levels of imagination, levels of creativity. We have the energetic spectrum, areas that don't translate into happy, sad, glad, etc., but that as we measure both physiologically and just get a sense, that sparkle in the eye factor, that we bring a circle into each of these dimensions. We also look at things like volatility. For example, in America, in my town, one of the richest towns in America, in Marin County, in San Rafael, etc., there are people living under bridges, and there are people living in $50 million homes. That is a lot of volatility. In other places, such as Copenhagen, Denmark, there's much less volatility, much more of a middle ground, but there's also a very important element of no background anxiety. Every single person who wants a home, who wants support, has got it. The government officials go out looking, just in case someone's a bit delirious or something and isn't coming home, to offer them an apartment. Danish children get paid to have a college education. And so everyone has one. Job satisfaction is very high. So if we look at all of these metrics, aiming for a 360 view, one of the things that we can start to see are trends, patterns, and return on capital. In other words, how much money does it take the government of Denmark per capita, per person, to create this level of 360-degree well-being, and how do they do it? This, I think, is ultimately the mark of intelligence. I'd say the first and one of the more important metrics of intelligence is, do we want to know this information? And the second is that as we create these metrics and gather data and discover, for example, that a tribe in the Amazon has 10 times higher well-being in a certain specific area and 100 times lower well-being in another area, we can start to learn the data points that connect one group, one culture, creating well-being in a certain pattern relative to another in another area. We can see the connection between environment and experience as we gather this information. So I think one of the most exciting things is the map paradigm. And the second is the system for measuring the data. Now, it's very easy to measure things like how long does it take to buy an item, how easy it is to buy an item. And in an area like that, the United States probably, is certainly a front runner in the world for the ease of shopping. But how easy is it to have a meaningful conversation after the death of a child in Uganda, in Zimbabwe, in the Brazilian jungle, in the Brazilian rural areas, in the Brazilian major cities, in American major cities, in Seattle, in San Francisco? How easy is it to find a human being capable of empathizing, capable, and willing? And just to give a little bit of an insight into, some of these different metrics that I think need to fall into this map of total well-being. I recently did an outreach project with my neighbors in San Francisco, dropping off letters inviting different kinds of connectivity. It largely fell flat, and there was met with a certain degree of hostility. And I just moved into an apartment in Thailand, and on our very first night walked over, and without any language, we were warmly invited. And I have the feeling and the visceral experience, because I do it, and it's been verbally affirmed by the one person who speaks some English, I am welcome in their homes at any point. And so we joke, play, dance, share a dog, do this, discuss, play. We just show up with food, and they try it, and they offer us all the food they want. And it's a quality of spontaneity, meaning this is not planned. This is, how about it? And 5 minutes later, we're there. It's not formal, very little protocol. It's got a very warm emotional temperature. So quality of belonging, I would kind of put this in one of the metrics. How easy is it to connect warmly with another human being in your environment and feel like you belong? That's actually a very important metric for me personally, and it's about 10 times higher in Thailand than in Marin County, in my experience. But this is the kind of thing that can give us a map of the probable and real trade-offs we make choosing to live and embody a specific culture. It can bring awareness to the strengths and the limitations of every culture, thus empowering choices that are more conscious, that are more balancing. In other words, the reason it's so important and the reason I chose Thailand was for this very quality, in that medicine is often about bringing people back to a state of balance. And the big imbalance in my world, growing up, was the level of dissociation, the level of trauma, the level of emotional distance and numbness. And wait a minute. And so Thailand, being a country in which it is unusually warm, inclusive, unusually feminine within the current power structures around the world, it's kind of leaning in the opposite direction, and in fact anthropologists and observers have often pointed out that America and Thailand are at opposite points on a number of cultural continuums, bringing balance. So this is my idea worth action. I challenge you to create a map that would encompass the full spectrum, not only of the areas of well-being noted and made significant in your culture, but of all the different cultures, all the different human values, from emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, monetary, etc. And learn where you're strong, where you're weak, and begin taking action to restore balance. Good luck.